Hi, I'm Tim Kramer. I'm the API Developer Evangelist for FBS, and today I'm going to talk to you about Swagger, the Open API specification, and middleware technologies. Thanks for coming, and I'll stick around for questions after. Welcome to the RESO Remote Digital Tech Summit. This is Open API Architectures. There's my contact details. If you want to get in touch with me, please do. What is Swagger? Swagger was the trade name of an API specification that was maintained originally by SmartBear Ltd. It's a YAML or JSON-based document format that describes an API, including all the endpoints, the request and response formats, security schemas, parameters, error codes in a reusable format. And it has a tool set that goes along with it. That was re-released in 2016 as OAS, the Open API Specification, and has a lot of industry backing, including the big players like Google and Amazon and Microsoft and those types. The ecosystem that was built around the Swagger toolset, the OAS toolset, includes tools to auto-generate documentation, interactive tools for testing APIs, as well as scaffolding tools that can create SDKs and wrappers for APIs in a variety of programming languages. Those two things are called Swagger UI, which is the user interface part that lets you kick the tires on an API, and we'll be demoing that in a minute here. And then the other is Swagger Code Gen, which is a tool set that will take the YAML or JSON Swagger document that you've created to describe your API, and it'll scaffold out a tool set, an SDK, that can be used to interact with that API. It's pretty powerful. The scaffolding, in my experience, I'm no expert with it, but it tends to be a little bit rough. But as far as a quick way to get going, it works really well. And there's a very wide selection of languages that it supports, everything from the common stuff like Ruby and Go and Java, like I've got below there, all the way out to Scala and Rust and some of the more exotic languages. So now we're going to go ahead and take a look at what a Swagger document looks like and what it gives you. Okay, this is Swagger Hub. This is created by SmartBear that we talked about a little bit ago. And this is the YAML document that I've created to describe the RESO Web API. This is somewhat tailored to the FBS implementation of the Web API, but I would guess 98% of this is applicable to any implementation of the Web API. You can see that it's pretty straightforward. There's an info block to start with that gives the version number and the title and description. And then you describe your paths. These are the endpoints within the API. You can provide descriptions and things like that to help with the documentation generation. And you can reuse, that's what these $ref signifiers are. These are reusable response codes and response bodies. So if you have similar response types across the API, then you don't have to repeat yourself over and over. Here's the property request, and you can see that we now have a parameters block here, and we're using, because these parameters are common to so many different endpoints, we're reusing these as well. So the select param, the top, skip, all those, they're the same across all the different resource types within the RESO Web API, so we can reuse those as well. The individual property endpoint has slightly different parameters available, not as many parameters that you need to pass in because you're only grabbing one. And with the media, the only param is the select param. So you can see it's a fairly extensive document, but there's not much beyond that original description. It's just different resource types, different endpoint descriptions. And then down here, we're into our components section. And this is where all the elements that you reuse across the resources can be defined. You can see that you can set the param and give it a type, whether it's string or integer or whatever. And there's additional parameters or additional facets that you can set per parameter, including in this instance, you can set a min-max for the integer value. You can set defaults for these. And once again, the descriptions. So the auto-generated documentation will be a little more user-friendly. You can also provide even examples. So for the filter, perhaps, we could add an example there that would show what a valid filter might look like. So these things can be enhanced as we go, and I'm hoping that we can work together collaboratively and make this OAS Swagger doc something that any provider that's using the Web API can benefit from. The cool part over here is this is what is generated by the Swagger UI. And Swagger UI, like I said, is open source, so there's no cost to using it. It's a JavaScript widget that you could embed in your documentation website. And you basically just give it the parameter of your JSON or YAML Swagger document, and it generates this out of the box. And so I'm sure most of us have seen this before, but it's pretty cool in that I can go in here and authorize using my bearer token. And now as a third-party developer, I can immediately start interacting with the Web API. I don't need to download an SDK and go through that learning process and try to figure out how that's going to work with my local platform. And I can get right to work, start making requests, start pulling data from the live API that I have access to, and sort of kick the tires without an extensive learning curve. So let's try and do this here. You can see it even generates based on the parameters that I've defined in the YAML doc. I could provide any of these parameters, and they'll be included in the request to the API. So I can, tinker with my filters. I can play with the order bys and see how it affects the results I'm actually getting. So now we're going to go out and make a live request to the RESO Web API at FlexMLS, and you can see I've got the expected data coming back. This is on a development instance, so most of the data is pretty bogus, but you get the point that we're seeing legitimate data coming back from a live API with no coding on our part. We just basically plugged in the widget and it's done. You can also see your request headers and request duration. This will show you the basic expected response codes and types. I didn't do this because it's just a really complex resource with many different fields, but you can create a sample payload so the user can see what they should expect from any of these. And you see that it generates any of these GET requests for any of the endpoints that are available. If there are additional, methods that we want to implement, puts and patches and posts and those things, you can also define those just the same, and they'll show up here as well, and you can actually test those payloads as well. You can make actual post requests and create resources. Generally speaking, middleware is any software that sits between any other two pieces of software and facilitates their communication. We've looked at a few different middleware vendors in the real estate market. The first one is PieSync. They specialize in two-way contact syncing. Some of the other vendors don't necessarily specialize in the two-way sync. They only push data one way. API Nation is a full-service middleware vendor. They basically will build out the entire process flow for you and then provide it to your customers. Zapier is the DIY, do-it-yourself middleware, and it allows sort of a snap-together Lego-style functionality that's aimed at non-technical end users to let people create relatively complex process flows without any programming background or needing to understand the complexities of how to communicate with those. Zapier has been working with us. We built a Zapier app, as they call it. So our API is defined within Zapier, and from that app, we can create what they call zaps. A zap is just a process flow that is sort of canned. So the end user logs in to Zapier, then authenticates against both ends of that API process flow, and it's off and running. So we've created zaps for most of the common CRMs, including Top Producer, LionDesk, Wise Agent, Zoho CRM, to allow agents to auto sync contacts from the Spark platform over to those CRMs, although the process flow could go the other way if you have a use case there. Smart Alto is one of our partners that does pre-qualification of leads for agents, and they push the data back to us. And then there's a variety of Google Apps integrations that we've created as well via Zaps, including things like pushing open house dates to an agent's calendar to remind them that it's upcoming, syncing their Google address book from Google Contacts, pushing listing information about listings that have recently closed or are about to expire, either to a Google spreadsheet or to their calendar to let them know that an expiration date is upcoming. Things like that are pretty easy to accomplish via Zapier. So we're going to take a look at that now. This is Zapier's application. I've logged in using my account, and this is a listing of the Zaps that I've created. We've got everything from syncing contacts to Google Contacts to from Zillow to Spark, FlexMLS to Wise Agent, LionDesk, SmartAlto, all those that I spoke about. And we're going to create a new Zap now. And a Zap, as I mentioned, is an end-to-end process flow. So we're going to take the Spark platform as our trigger, and when a modified contact is detected in FlexMLS, we're going to take that and push it to Top Producer. You can choose your account here. You can have an authenticated account via OIDC, which is what I already did. So otherwise it would have popped up a window asking me to authenticate against Spark. And then I can give it a date that I want to search from. And it'll go out and it'll pull information from the Spark platform. And I'm going to take that information and push it to Top Producer and create a new contact within Top Producer based on that. And we've got our account in Top Producer. Just as before, I would have authenticated via OIDC and given Zapier access to my Top Producer account. And now I can map all the parameters from Flex to Top Producer. So the lead provider would be Flex. The unique ID of the contact would probably be the ID coming from Flex. The first name would be the given name within FlexMLS. Last name is family name within Flex. Oops. And obviously you don't have to do this every time. This is just when you're defining the job for the first time. Okay, and I can go through and create as many or as few of these as I have information for. Create any message subjects, and if you want to have a default that passes along to the agent within Top Producer, you can do this. Set the role, set the source, all this good stuff. And like I said, there's many different parameters that we can set here, including all the search criteria that the agent may have been tracking in FlexMLS. We're going to go ahead and continue. And now we've got our contact defined. And we're going to go ahead and test that here just to show you how it works. So the lead was sent to Top Producer from Zapier. We can go into Top Producer, check our contacts. And that's the one that we just created, was Chris Merrier. You can see that we've got all the, I didn't address any, or I did not map the address, but we've got the name and the phone number, the email, lead source is showing up. There's the source and the subsource, and any of the other information that I had taken the time to map would now be showing up. Within Zapier, you can create this schedules, Zapier calendars, to trigger these zaps on a daily basis or whatever you want, or you can run them as an ad hoc job. So I hope that gives you a basic idea of how easy it is to work with Zapier and to create these process flows. You can add additional steps if you need to, and I believe that there's somewhere around 2,500 different apps that are native within Zapier already, and more are being added all the time. So this is a really easy way to get up and running with middleware. If you'd like to learn more about FlexMLS and FBS, here's all our social media. And of course, you can contact me. My contact details are on the first slide. And thanks for attending.